Hello, thanks for making the time to join us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of Multnomah Village. We've been around for 43 years now. We're open on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and weekends from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Our website is always open. You can shop there day and night at annieblooms.com. We offer curbside pickup, in-store pickup, local delivery, a couple of different shipping options. I'm going to put into the chat right now the link for Jonathan's brand new book. So you can click on that, and we would love it if you would purchase that from Annie Bloom's. We'd really appreciate it. Pacific Northwest author Jonathan Evison is here tonight to read from his new novel coming out tomorrow, Small World. You can buy it today. Jonathan will be in conversation with Oregon writer Eileen Garvin, who's the author of The Music of Bees. Let's let another person in here. And they're going to be talking to each other about books. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to type a question into the chat, and one of us will be happy to read that. You can also click on the little hand icon that's in the reactions menu at the bottom of the screen there and ask a question live if you're daring enough to come on screen in your pajamas. Let me tell you about A Small World, or it's just Small World. Sorry, it's not A Small World. Jonathan Evison's Small World is an epic novel for now, set against such iconic backdrops as the California Gold Rush, the development of the Transcontinental Railroad, and a speeding train of modern-day strangers forced together by fate. It is a grand entertainment that asks big questions. The characters of Small World connect in the most intriguing and meaningful ways, winning, breaking, and winning our hearts again. In exploring the passengers' lives and those of their ancestors more than a century before, Small World chronicles 170 years of American nation building from numerous points of view across place and time. And it does it with a full-hearted, full-throttle pace that asks on the most human, intimate scale whether it is truly possible to meet and survive the choices posed and forced by the age. The result is a historical epic with a Dickensian flair, a grand entertainment that asks whether our nation has made good on its promises. It dazzles as its characters come to connect with one another through time, and it hits home as it probes at our country's injustices, big and small, straight through to its deeply satisfying final words. Jonathan
I think we're done here. Thanks for coming, folks.
Yeah. Jonathan Evison is the author of the novel. Oh, sorry, what were you saying?
You pretty much said it all there. I think we're done.
Okay. Thank you, good night. Jonathan Evison is the author of the novels All About Lulu, West of Here, The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance, Lawn Boy, and Legends of the North Cascades. He lives with his wife and family in Washington State. I'll also tell you about The Music of Bees, which is Eileen Garvin's novel. Three lonely strangers in a rural Oregon town, each working through grief and life's curveballs, are brought together by happenstance on a local honeybee farm where they find surprising friendship, healing, and maybe even a second chance just when they least expect it. And I'm going to put in the chat a link to Eileen's book as well. So there you go. And everyone welcome Jonathan and Eileen.
Thanks for having us. And thanks, Eileen, for graciously hosting me when you're not even supporting your own book and you're in Mexico. That's really nice. I'm just here in rainy Bainbridge Island, so I got nothing to do, but you.
Yeah, I shouldn't have told you that. I shouldn't have told you I was in Mexico, but thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And thanks, Michael, for hosting us. Annie Bloom's is a great shop. So anybody who hasn't been there should definitely go pay a visit. Jonathan, we haven't met before, but I've been a fan of your work for such a long time. I have lived in the Pacific Northwest my whole life. I grew up in Spokane. I lived in Seattle. I live in Hood River now. And I feel like your work has this kind of, I guess, I would call Cascadian sensibility to it.
I'll take it.
Landscape, you know, your characters, your motivations. And so I'm just really thrilled to be here to talk with you about.
Well, next time I come down to Hood River on a brewery tour, I'm buying you some fights, okay?
Yes. Well, I used to write a lot for the Department of Tourism in Oregon, so I know all about beer.
Yeah, right. And Full Sail's there, right?
Full Sail, Frame,
yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna get in trouble now. Ferment, Horse Feathers, Sol Solera. I mean, it goes on and on and on. There's a lot of beer in Hood River. Yes.
And it's just so beautiful too.
It really is. Before we jump into talking, also, I just sorry, because I'm a fan, I have to congratulate you. This is your 7th book. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment in itself. But on top of that, you're a New York Times bestseller, your Publishers Weekly called you out, Indie Next, you have movies made from your book. So this is like a great accomplishment on top of a very big pile. So hearty congratulations to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. It's a dream. You know what? Until I was 39 years old and my wife was pregnant with our first kid and we were living on like fish cakes and cheap wine, man. And then she popped out that first kid and my book hit, and like, it's just been literally a fairy tale ever since.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're so prolific. I mean, how do you just
I'm
how do
still
you
batting
produce
less
them?
than 500. there's like 9 unpublished books to 7 published. So I'm still not even hitting 50-50. The key to my prolificacy is I'm manic as hell. You know what I mean? I'm just like bipolar, off the charts, the good kind, the kind that I don't get depressed ever. I throw away a novel, drag it into the trash, and I'm depressed for like, 12 minutes. I'm eternally optimistic, but I have to focus it. And that's what allowed me to keep writing for so many books that nobody was publishing or even reading, was that I just have to do it. It's like, I got a tiger by the tail, so it's just drink beer, write books, drink beer, write books, walk like 7 miles a day.
Well, I read that you actually physically buried 3 of your novels and that's so brave, because everyone says that, like, beginning writer. I came to publishing late as well. I'm not going to tell you how old I am now, because I guess I'm that vain, but I published my memoir when I was 39, and now
That's exactly how old I was with Lulu. Yeah.
And the Music of Bees just came out this spring, and you hear writers always say this, like, you definitely have to throw these things away, but you want to believe that you're not the person who has to throw the thing away. And so that's just so brave that you actually physically buried them as a way to move on.
Oh yeah, I salted the earth so nothing would grow there ever again. I was worried when I heard they dug the liquor barn up that was behind the motorhome village I was living in when I buried them. I was worried that somebody might unearth them. Nobody has them, and it's good.
Yeah. Well, how is this one different for you? I mean, it sounds like when you say tiger by the tail, and it's sort of like, I like to call it my sandbox. Like, this is just what I like to do. I like to spend my time moving words around and coming up with problems for characters and fixing them. Is it different now that it's your 7th book?
I think I've just gotten more efficient, if anything. Like, I'm just, I don't, there was you used to write yourself into corners a little bit more, or I used to be of the mind that I just like to kind of grope my way through it and let the story come to me anymore. And I think as much as just writing more books, what's done it to me is having 3 kids, because it's like, look, you got your writing time now, you can't mess around. I would say that I think I prepare myself a little better, but more like an athlete than an artist. You know what I mean? Because I cram all my writing into 3 days a week, and I go for like 12 to 16 hours. But the other 4 days a week, I'm just talking to myself about getting game ready. When that whistle blows on Sunday, man, I'm going to hit it ready to play. I'm not going to mess around on Facebook. I'm not going to, and so I think just focus and workflow.
You're very efficient then.
Yeah. I kind of have to be with the 3 kids. And also, it's hard to make money writing. So if I'm going to support, if I'm going to feed a family of 5, it's like, I have to publish a book every couple of years, until, maybe this one will change that, maybe I'll sell 2 million copies and I can relax, but I don't think I know how.
Well, I don't think and probably, relaxing. I don't know. I'm not very good at relaxing myself. But when you said that about how you have your writing time, but then the time that you're not writing, you're always thinking about it. So you're primed to go, like an athlete visualizes their game. It reminds me of Anthony Doerr was interviewed in Poets and Writers last month, I think, about his new book. And he talked about how the 2 things that help the writing process are sleep and time. And I love that you kind of have to let so it's going on even when you're not doing it. It's happening in your brain. And I
would say beer and isolation for me.
Beer and isolation.
Well, I need beer. I mean, after 8 hours of writing, I got to start drinking just to stay focused and fresh, because I metabolize this stuff so fast, but it actually helps keep me focused.
Yeah. Well, speaking of focus, I want to ask some specific questions about Small World because the other folks who are watching haven't had the chance to read it like I have. It's coming out tomorrow, which is so exciting. And so I wanted to talk with you about your characters, these families. We have the Bergens, the Chens, the Flowers, and the Tullys. They represent such interesting demographics in the United States, and we've got the 1850s and then 2019, and you have the Irish immigrant story, Chinese immigrant story, African Americans enslaved and free, and the displaced Native Americans. And I just wonder, like, what was it that drew you to these families? What first kind of did they just come to you, or did you start with the idea of wanting to examine the cross section of those four particular groups?
Well, first of all, there was more. I had some Germans, and I had Mexican lineage as well. Those got cut only because those particular characters were some of my favorite, but I had to get everybody to coalesce. I had to get everybody on the train and so forth. So it started to create some continuity problems. It killed me to do it because I love the characters. But the answer, in short, is, we have the American mythos. We've a long time we leaned on the melting pot metaphor, but for me, it's always been like a quilt or something woven. And so I just envisioned everything that's supposed to be the strength, this pluralism, and the racial dynamism and cultural dynamism that's supposed to be the strength of the American experiment. I wanted to represent that in as many ways through as many characters as possible, and sort of weave them into this fabric. And I wanted it to kind of be a salve for our time right now, because, we've taken what's supposed to be our greatest strength, and we've devolved to tribalism, basically. And so I wanted the novel to kind of be a reminder of how connected we really are, from the very beginning. And when we talk about America, we usually talk about it being built by immigrants, but really, it's every bit, if not more, the story of the people who were here before us and the people who were brought here against their will. Because, while we like to we glorify this ethos of autonomy and individualism and ruggedness and stuff like that, when it comes down to it, this nation was built on free and exploitive labor. You know what I mean? And these are truths that the whole canon of not the whole canon, but much of the canon of American literature has been perpetrating for hundreds of years. And so I wanted to address that in a way that didn't totally diminish those things that are worthy about the American experiment. I didn't want to just crap on America necessarily. I just wanted to show that we're really just our stories.
And I love the way you did that with because I agree with everything that you said, and specifically as the immigrant story, but then looking at as we've been reckoning with our history of enslavement and displacement of Native Americans, and which is still an ongoing story. And I love the way you brought that to the fore with these characters. I loved them. I don't even know which ones I like the best, because I thought I was going to like the 19th century stuff a little bit better, because I tend to like the historical fiction, but I really loved how you trace the descendants. I'm not giving anything away here, but you tracing their descendants to 2019. I started with a real love for the twins. There's some Irish twins in there. I was going to make a joke actually about your last two, your 6th and 7th novels are kind of like Irish twins. Because didn't they come out in like 9 months of each other or something?
6 months. It's not an enviable position to be in, actually.
Oh, well, it sounds
cannibalize each other.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but you have real twins in this story, and I'm, as I mentioned when we were doing the tech check, I have 4 siblings. I'm very close to my brothers and sisters, and so that story definitely really spoke to me. But also George Flowers and Lula and the Chens. They're just. Do you have a favorite, or did you just sort of kind of?
No, I can't. It's like my kids, you know what I mean? I'm physically, I could see maybe some characters being more flawed than others or anything like that, but I have to love them the same, if I'm going to create them and, do them justice. I can't, yeah, out of all my books, I can't say I love any characters more than the other. There's ones I could say my favorite guys to sit down and have a beer with, or like, which character I'd be most likely romantically involved with, or something like very specific, but like as far as loving them, no, I see them all as a piece of one big family.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask also about the time period. The 1850s is obviously historically so rich with what's going on in America, and that's some of it's overtly talked about in your story, and some of it's just backdrop. But why did you decide upon the two timelines?
Well, first of all, I picked 1850 because it was pre-Civil War, and I just thought that was a period that's been explored a little less than post-Civil War. I mean, if I just moved it forward another 13 or 14 years, it became I think more well-worn turf in terms of historical fiction, particular historical fiction of a Western bent. But I took, it's not the first time I've used a bifurcated timeline. As you know, in West of Here, I did it as well. I found that it was a very interesting way to draw the history back and forth. With West of Here, it was about boom and bust. And in certain ways, this is about a similar thing. I mean, I just, West of Here is kind of a microcosm of this novel in that way. Like, I just like this idea of a bifurcated timeline. I like the challenge it presents. I like the room. I feel like there's a whole living story in between that lives more in the writer's or the reader's imagination, than if I were to overtly explore it, like in a linear fashion, I guess. And there's this like jazzy idea of call and response. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just fun to work with. And it's hard, and I like the challenge. That was the main thing about this book, is I really wanted to risk falling flat on my face. I mean, I needed something to do with all this energy. And I thought, like I said, I had to cut 6 or 7 characters out. And then there was a point in the middle of the book where honestly, I made a decision that was very fateful. One night out in the garage, I was about halfway through the novel. I knew where I was going with it. I had a handle on it. And I thought, I conceived a whole other generation for each of these lineages, in between George and Brianna, in between, and I was going to blow it up even more. And I felt like I was ready for it. And I decided that it was just too big of an ask for a reader. I felt lucky to get this book in at 500 pages. This would have brought it to 800 pages. And I just thought, I gotta walk that line between making it a real challenge for the reader and a big ask, but not so much that it's going to bog it down. I wanted it to have momentum. I wanted it to have, so I'm lucky. I could have very easily made the other decision. I just sat there pondering. I said, you know what? A couple times I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, I sketched out the characters. They had names, they had places, they had situations. I was ready to roll. And I said, no, not going to do it. I'm glad I didn't, because I'd still be editing it today.
Well, and that's something that's just, I enjoyed so much about reading this, the complexity of what you built here. It's not linear. And I kind of outlined your chapter. So you've got 3 sections, you've got 2 time periods, you've got dozens of points of view, 4 different families. And yet as a reader, it feels seamless and natural when you're going back and forth. And I can't say why, but it feels natural. The progressions feel natural. And I was curious how you decided to structure it. Do you hold the whole thing in your mind? Do you have a map? Do you have to kind of move pieces around? Because it's quite an undertaking, to keep that going with telling those stories without losing the reader, which you don't. I always feel like I'm right there with you, but it was just like the seams aren't showing.
That's good. I think they might have shown a little with West of Here, but it was charming enough to get over that. But I feel like I remember readers saying, man, I'm kind of getting confused here with the character. So I think that was my proving ground to learn how to do that more seamlessly. And what I found out, let me answer this. First of all, I wrote it linearly and organically in the sense that it's basically in the order I wrote it. A few chapters may have been moved around. I might have switched the Chins and the Bergens here and there, just because which one followed better after the other tonally, or the emotional charges or something like that. But it's roughly how I wrote it, because I didn't want to miss any opportunities. You know what I mean? If I just write each narrative separately and then tried to nest them together. And then I lose so many opportunities. And those are the opportunities that make the book actually seamless and easy to track, is that I created a system of connectivity, because the whole goal is, when you've got 20 main characters or whatever, there's going to be times where people are off the page for 70 and 80 pages at a time. And that's a big ask of the reader. That's a long time for them to remember. So you develop a system of finding little subtle ways to bring those characters that are not on the screen into the consciousness, back into the consciousness of the reader. And that could be geography, that could be theme, that could be genealogy. It could be just something very specific. It could be a reference to a color. It could be just, it could be all these little things. And you just keep heaping these layers of connectivity on it. And then you start to build a bigger world that has more continuity and more, just a general feeling of the whole same world instead of these separate things. And it's like the devil's in the details. It's those little connective tissues, I think that make it easy to track,
It's I like the way you described that, and I was thinking about how you have these kind of the characters have these sort of glancing interactions with each other in the beginning, and then that builds toward the end, of course, where I don't want to give anything away, but we have this, or maybe it's, well, I'm not going to talk about that, but anyway, it felt very organic. So maybe that's the way what you're talking about here, where you see the opportunity, where you have say George and now I'm blanking on her name, the Bergen twin, the girl, the Nora.
Ben and Nora,
Yeah, so the way Nora and George Flowers interact with each other, or in another, or two characters that pass each other on the trail in California, and it never comes to anything else. They just see each other and it moves on from there. And then there are more explicit interactions and maybe even relationships that or events that are happening where they're together. But it felt like it felt organic. So did those kind of come about of that organic process, or were you kind of taking advantage? Maybe it's a little bit of both. I mean, and it's hard to talk about what you did, and right.
I think you're doing a great job of that. I mean, I think you have a really good understanding of what how I viewed it. And I think a lot of it actually, people call this Dickensian, and I call it Dickensian too. And that's one of the reasons. And even the title is Dickensian, this idea of a small world, because there is room for coincidence in a novel. It's supposed to be a taboo, but if it's done right, the whole goal is to make the book what it's called, a small world. I wanted a small world where this was possible, where it was possible for George Flowers to walk by Finn and Nora in the street, with Worthy Warnock, Worthy Warnock. And if you can earn the trust of the reader through this world building, then it doesn't feel like unlikely coincidence. It feels like fate or a sort of inevitable occurrence. And it's got to be consistent and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think even though you're writing about the 19th century, in those instances, it feels more believable now because the world does feel very small, sometimes in very good ways. But to a 21st century audience, it feels more likely that you'd have those coincidences happening in our present day lives, I think. So, but I really enjoyed that. And I wanted to ask you about the idea of America, which you talked about early on, and how it's represented in the current day. It's easy to look at Finn and Nora or George Flowers or Wu Chen and say, okay, those people represent, we can see the American dream that they're after. That's a story we've heard before of immigrants or freed enslaved Africans. But I was curious, I wanted to hear you talk about the people, their descendants in 2019, and how the American dream is operating in that generation, what they're after.
Well, in the case of, say, Malik Flowers, you can see that his opportunities are still somewhat limited in a way. It's the same sort of 20th century model, like the only way out of the hood is, to be an athlete or be a musician or be an entertainer. And, but you can see how that has changed for the better in a sense. At least Malik, he grows up with a single mom. He grows up, he works at the rec center, and he's had these strong role models in his life, and he's sort of continuing that, and working with those kids. And, I think it shows that how people's early good fortune has affected their, Wu Chen kind of lucked into a fortune in the gold rush as many did, but it really had an effect on how his family framed themselves economically, where their standing was, and so forth, and how, I mean, these things ripple out and they affect us 5 generations later. I mean, I'm a 39th generation peasant or something, you know what I mean? My family never, ever had any money. And I remember the day I finally learned to like value myself, or like, because I was always like the poor kid and lived in kind of a wealthier neighborhood. And I just remember I was like in my mid 30s before I realized, everybody was always lowballing me for every job and stuff like that. And then one day I just woke up and said, man, screw that. Some producer offered me $1,200 to head write a pilot. And I was like, nope, 12,000. And they just said, done. That was it. My family had been agonizing for generations. And all I had to do was say, the guy he's like midway through a bite of his sandwich. He's like, done. Just like that. 10 times what he offered me. And I realized that people aren't taught the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Classism has always been alive and well. And like, I grew up with rich kids that were taught, destiny is a ladder and all you got to do is climb it, because they had such resources. And, it's interesting that even after generations, some people aren't, they're not taught how to and they're not granted the opportunities more fundamentally.
And none of your characters, I mean, all your characters that find their way, that find success, they're all ones that do, it's luck, right? It's luck and I mean, hard work for sure, but you can look at something like how things went differently for Nora. Now this is like, I don't want to talk about that, so that's not polite, because everyone else.
That's all right. It's not specific enough that we'll give it up. But I think that you bring up an interesting point about luck and good fortune, because the one thing I know about really wealthy people is they don't like to acknowledge luck. They've got this, wealthy people in America, and I don't know, probably everywhere, have this they adopt this sort of bootstrapping, like, I earned it the hard way. Why doesn't that bum or that single mom go out and get a job and earn it? They don't acknowledge the fact that they've been blessed with good fortune or been lucky, or the fact that, for generations, they've had the resources, And
right.
So that's a continuing theme in all my books. The people that end up doing good realize that they didn't do it by themselves. They did it with the help of others,
Yeah, well, like you're saying, you're set up generations ago by the great-great-grandfather or whoever who made money and passed it on, whether it's just in, owning a home, the things that people take for granted that they don't recognize that it doesn't come from nowhere, I mean, you look at someone like, I loved Brianna, that mom, that, just willing to do whatever it takes to protect her son and let him use the talents that he has to go as far as he can, but she's also already thinking about the next step, like what comes after basketball,
she's not letting him. And she also just knows that, the ethos she was taught was like, but my mom was this way, picture, plan for the worst. I get careful. She's in the other room. You plan for the worst, because that's what's going to happen. And like, I didn't embrace that. I mean, I'm like, I'm going to plan for the best. And if life just keeps kicking me in the face with a Kodiak steel-toed booth, so be it. I don't want to live that way. You know what I mean? that's what freedom means to me. Freedom to think beyond the constraints of what you're taught or what the culture offers you, and just, try to have the fortitude, which just starts with the belief to break free of those expectations. And it's much easier said than done.
But it's like you said, that conversation you had with that producer, it's the moment that then changes the conversation forever. Because then the next time you were pitching or negotiating, you were thinking about the 12,000 instead of 1,200. So it changes the conversation.
Right. Or like, when I was a kid and I said, I'm going to mow the neighbor's lawn, and they say, how much are you going to charge him? I'll say $10. I mean, that's a little high. Maybe you ought to go $7 in case there's competition. I'm going to tell my kid, hell no, that's a big lawn, $25. You know what I mean? So it's going to carry on into the next generation. You have to,
advocate for
still
yourself.
are learning from our forebears. That's another, I mean, it's like, we're still connected to our people. And that's why it's so hard to escape your people sometimes, like,
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of my grandmother, who is no longer with us, and I adored her, and she, I mean, I still do kind of talk to her still, but she helped raise us. And if anybody ever got like too dressed up or whatever, especially a woman, she'd say, "Oh, honey, not too fancy," like you don't want to stick out, you don't want to stick your neck out because you might get your head chopped off. So yeah, but I love that you're watching your characters develop those and change, and so. And so, I mean, I wonder, you brought up Malek as an example of when I asked you about the American dream, and you talked earlier about wanting this to be a salve for the 21st century America we're living in. So when these people all do converge, can you talk a little bit about that? Like what you're seeing with, Jenny Chen is clearly in some place completely different than Wu, and yet she's not happy. So what's going on in that America?
Well, I mean, in that case, it's like, Jenny learns that this old idea of the American dream and just, getting rich and having money is supposed to be the solving every problem. And here she's got a really high paying, mid six figures paying job, but she's miserable at it. And she's, she's trying to, I don't know. Yeah, this is difficult. I don't know. This is a hard one to answer, actually. I look at it so much as an extension of what came before, but like reflecting back on it, I would say in the case of that particular character is that, this is what she was taught to want, to
Right.
try to conserve your money and consolidate it and make money. And that's the most important thing, so that your kids are better off than you are. And then realize that that's not really making anybody better off, because it's not leaving time for herself to be with her family. Her kids are kind of bratty. I mean, they're good kids, but they're kind of bratty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas 5 generations before, they probably have, coal dust on their face.
Right.
So, I just think every character, I mean, I think the saddest one is Luyu, because really, or Layla, because because they're really, that lineage has not been able to evolve as much, I mean, and the native people's got just such a raw deal. I mean, that it's irreparable, and that's why it makes me mad when people talk about repartitions and stuff like that. And they say, "Well, my dad, I'm not a racist, or I'm not," people they don't understand that they're not seeing the big picture. You know what I mean?
We have very short-term memory, and I mean that we're a very young country. We're a very young country that we don't recognize that mentality you talked about. People like, well, I didn't do that, or my parents did such and such, but it's like failing to look at kind of the broader view of what.
Yeah, because individualism is such a central part of our ethos. You know what I mean? That it's pretty insidious. You know what I mean? Like this whole idea that people don't want student loan forgiven because theirs wasn't forgiven. Like, what is that? So you just want to. It reminds me when I was a 20-year-old working on film sets, and film sets are very hierarchical and people are just jerks. I mean, like the director just won't even talk to a PA. I mean, it's like a rite of passage. You have to work up the ladder. You just get abused less and less until you get to the guy that's just a jerk to everybody. And I always hated that. I don't understand. So just because you suffered, you want other people to suffer. How does that make how does that make you happy? How do you sleep at night? You know what I mean? It's like.
Well, and sorry, to go back to Jenny just for a minute, I found her so interesting too, because she represents, it's 2019 and she's in her 30s, early 40s, something like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking, God, I've written 2.5 books since then. I think I have her at about 35 or 6.
Yeah. So peak of her, she's her earning years. And you start with her stranded in an airport. She's out doing this job she hates. She wants to be home with her family. And it really spoke to me because that really captures what a lot of my friends, were going through in 2019, and how interesting it is that now we've had the Great Resignation, and people are really, I'm sure you're feeling it up there in Bainbridge and Sequim as well as we are in Hood River and Portland, like this whole shift of well, maybe I don't want to do that job anymore that makes me, even if it made me a
Maybe
lot
I
of
don't
money.
want to get out of my pajamas today.
Maybe my family is more important and less money is more important. So it's really, I think it's fascinating to be living through that mentality right now. I have a
think
friend.
you're right. And I think maybe that's why people aren't going back to work. It's so weird, you know,
Yeah.
like everyone lost their job. And I think people are like, man, I was just killing myself before.
I think job openings in America are at an all-time high right now. And you know, where we are, it's more, Hood River's pretty small. It's like 7,500 people, but a lot of there are tons of small businesses there, and that's one of the things I love about that town. I know a lot of the people. I know the people who own Solstice Wood Fire Pizza. I know the people who own Freem. You know, they're my neighbors, and they can't stay open because they can't hire enough people to run.
My brother-in-law owns restaurants, and he has. It's hard to staff anybody. And you know.
Speaking of Bainbridge, I should have reminded people. See, I told you I'm not good at multitasking. It's 8:37. People who have questions, if you could put them in the chat, we're gonna have a chance to ask Jonathan some questions. And in the meantime, I'll remind people, tomorrow you get to be at Eagle Harbor Books in Bainbridge, which is such a great store. And it sounds like, are they asking people to register in advance for that event?
I don't know. I think maybe, but I'm a little scared because I don't know how much they're limiting attendance. I know everyone has to be vaxxed and masked and stuff like that. I mean, I'm excited and nervous at the same time, but there's nothing like the hometown event for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nuts. My detention teacher comes every time. My high school detention teacher's there. Like 10 guys I literally played Little League with are there. My mom is there. Several of my teachers, school administrators who suspended me are there. You know, it's just nothing like it. It's the fun because I'm like the prodigal son, even though I didn't really leave, but you know, I made good or whatever. And it's just so nice, and it fills me with warmth, and I feel so lucky. I tell my writer friends in Brooklyn, you know, swing a cat in Brooklyn, you'll hit a writer, but none of them have the home field advantage I do, man. I sell like 1,000 books every time out of one bookstore. It's nuts, man. More than I do. I mean, there's like 5 states, flyover states, where I don't sell that many books collectively, and out of one store, you know, and it's very unique that way. I mean, I know a lot of small towns have that ethos, but Bainbridge, for whatever reason, has this sort of singular place. And there's a lot of writers here. Guterson lives here. Kristen Hanna lives here. Susan Wiggs lives here. I mean, there's just like a disproportionate amount of writers, and there's like 100 book clubs. It's just like a very, I think because of the demographic pretty much is the demographic of literary fiction, which is college educated people between 35 and dead. You know what I mean? So like, and that's basically the demo. So it's like a readers and writers paradise.
And I have friends there. I'm a big fan of Bainbridge. My husband could never live there because it's not sunny enough for him, but I love it. And it's great reading weather, you know, just that kind of muted Pacific Northwest weather. So yeah, well, I hope it's a great event. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet.
Poor Eileen.
Yeah. So what else can I ask you about while people are thinking?
I don't know. It's that first question is always the hardest. You know, I guess maybe just why am I a little more nervous about this book than usual? I'm, you know, this book feels a little different for me upon its launch. The last one just sort of fell stillborn from the press, unfortunately. I mean, next to my other books, just because it was hard to garner publicity for 2 books within a 6-month period. And I think because of the time, the theme of the book was self-isolation, which was accidental. I mean, I think a lot of people last June didn't want to read about a guy living in a cave. But this one, interestingly, I feel like it's my best work in the sense that it's my most ambitious. I've put the most into it. I feel like I've executed it closer to my design than I ever have before. And at the same time, there's like less of me in it. And I think that's why I like it so much, because I hate myself, but I like myself on the page because I can edit myself there and I can kind of curate myself there. This guy's just spitting in your face and talking too loud most of the time and he's skipping transitions. And so I'm really it's cool because I feel like it's got a life of its own, and I feel less like I'm putting myself out there and more like I'm putting something I made out there. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I'm just really, I hope it does everything I want it to, and I hope it finds the readership that I want it to.
Yeah, that's interesting that, this is your seventh rodeo, and that it's not counting the 4 dead books or whatever.
Oh, and there's 5 others that I didn't
Okay.
bury too.
Okay,
So
right.
my
So
17th
just
rodeo.
yeah, that's interesting. That it feels, that it feels different and exciting in a different way. And you mentioned that you're kind of always, you just kind of like on the go with you're working all the time. So and you mentioned you're writing now, so you're writing and you're balancing your launch. How does that work for you?
Not very well.
very
Yeah, I actually am not going to try to write anything for the next couple weeks.
Mhm.
There was actually a 2-month period at the end of last year where I was deciding what I was going to publish next with Dutton, because I had finished one book that was sort of a Western, but I kind of got the sense that they were a little more excited about this reincarnation thing I was writing, even though it wasn't as far along. But until a decision was made about that, and like we all kind of got on the same page and decided where I had to do something. So I wrote a feature screenplay, which was really fun, called Grim and Barrett. It's about a failing dental practice. And it was really fun. I just needed something to do, and it only took 2 months, and they're pretty excited about it at the agency, and I like it. I don't like it like I writing books as much.
Yeah.
But what I liked about it is it was so, I don't mean this to sound like hubris, but it was so easy from a problem solving perspective. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's 20,000 words max, you're talking about 110 pages versus 700 pages with 20 points of view. So it's like, if you pump out a draft of a screenplay and it's very flawed, in like 8 hours, you can make that thing twice as good. I mean, it was so fun to get results that quick instead of weeks of slogging along, that it sort of energized me. It gave me something to do for a couple months, but now I'm really, really wanting to get back to work on the novel. So I can't wait I'm looking forward to touring and all that, but I just can't wait to get back in the garage,
Yep, I do know that feeling. I don't write in my garage, but I have a little cave. I get that. Okay, I have a question for you from Patricia. What authors do you feel have influenced your writing, and who do you admire?
Boy, a lot of, all the stuff on this book is like all the books that sort of inform Small World are almost all 19th century stuff, like Great Expectations and Jane Eyre and Huckleberry Finn and Grapes of Wrath and Invisible Man and The Adventures of Augie March, all novels that tried to sort of tackle this idea of the great American novel in some point. But so many contemporary writers I like, Stuart Onan and Lydia Yuknavitch, and on and on. And it's been thrilling as I wrote in a vacuum for 30 years. I didn't know anybody. My own mom wasn't reading my stuff. Most of my friends were kind of like jocks, in a good way, great guys, but like they didn't want to hear about my books, you know what I mean? So it was like, it wasn't until I finally started to publish that like I got to meet other writers I admire and have somebody to talk shop to. I didn't even have a facility to talk about what I did for the first 8 books I wrote. It's just something I did. I didn't go to an MFA program or even ever take a writing class. So it was like, it's been really fun the last 12 or 13 years just to meet other writers and like talk about the vagaries of the industry or the humiliations, as it were, most of the time, or just craft or and these were writers that some of these people, like the ones I just mentioned, are people that are now friends, and that's thrilling to me. Like you feel like you get to know the writers you love as friends, and then you actually meet them, and when they don't disappoint you, that's awesome.
And you can have a beer with them. That sounds wonderful, and that's something I meant to ask you about. It's interesting, the lack of, you don't have an MFA. I don't have an MFA. I don't have a writer's group. I never took a writing class. And I felt that similar sense of isolation for so many years. I loved what I was doing, but I didn't have anybody to talk to it about. And people that don't know, people that aren't writers, and they ask you what you're doing with your time, and it doesn't make any sense until you have a physical thing, and then they're like, oh, that's what you were doing all that time in that room. But it is kind of this lonely business. I think even if you do have the community of writers, the MFA program and such. When I launched the Music of Bees in April, Jay Ryan Stradall offered to host
I
me.
love Jay Ryan.
Yeah, and he, one of the first things he said was, "Hey, I'm like you. Like you know, I don't have the MFA. I don't have all the trappings that go with that, and I love that. I really liked him from the get-go, and it's the same kind of sensibility that you're talking about. And with that said, that's sort of and please, folks, keep putting your questions in the chat if you have. I won't hog the show here. Please put us your questions, and thank you, Patricia, for that one. What advice do you have for people who are writing? And you know, Portland has this wonderful literary arts and lecture series. I don't know if you've ever been to that, but they always ask at the end, you know, what advice do you have for young writers? Because there's lots of high school students in the audience, and the authors often make a point. Well, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are if you're getting started. But so what advice do you have for people who want to write?
Well, I think a big one for me, because I hear it a lot, even among my established writer friends, is this idea that the writer must be crippled with self-doubt all the time. And it's like, you got to get over that. You have to be very confident to do it. It's okay, be the hardest critic on yourself, but don't let it stop you from doing the work. You know what I mean? The work is never wasted. I mean, I've gotten 50,000 words into a book, and I have no trouble just dropping it in the trash and knowing that I have to start from scratch. I don't quantify the work in pages or words so much, although I just did. I'm just trying to make an example. Just do the work. I mean, I know it's a cliche to just say, sit your butt down and write, but it's the truth, because the more you do it, the more you unlock all these keys, the more the unconscious mind has so much to do with it. You know what I mean? Really, I think good writing is so much about just getting out of your own way. I mean, our young writing efforts are very self-conscious. There's a lot more of our personality in them, and we're trying to maybe edify the reader. We're just too aware of what we're trying to say and less aware of what are they getting at the other end. Like, just think of a narrative as information, is what I try to explain to people, so it's less daunting. Just think about the end user, which is basically you at the other end. What information are you doling out? It is a dance. You're doing it with the reader. You know, the reader's doing everything you're doing backwards and heels. So if you always think about that, it will help guide you. You know what I mean? What is somebody going to think? Get less tied up in yourself and your ideals and what you're trying to tell, what you're trying to say, and just do the work. And the more days you can stack together, the more, I mean, that's how it works for me. I got snowed in for 10 days last year. I wrote 140 pages. And each day it was more and more. And they were good. I mean, they were pretty polished. I mean, writing and rewriting them. I mean, I had 140 pages. And it was rewritten several times during that period, because I just got more and more productive every day. And when I gave myself to the story, I was living in it. And so much is about just making the commitment, and it's hard. And I have 3 kids, you know what I mean? If I can do it, you can do it. My friend Carol Casella, she's a freaking doctor. She has 2 sets of twins, okay? She's a doctor. She works insane hours. She still busts out a novel every 2 years. If she can do it, you can do it, you know? You just have to prioritize it. It can't be your guilty little secret. If you're too busy, then you better get up at 5 a.m, 2 hours before everybody else, and value that time, and value your work, and believe in yourself, and don't get crippled by self-doubt and, oh, it's not good enough, or you just can't be that way. It's like a chainsaw. You don't want to operate a chainsaw unless you're confident, right? You know, you got to own that thing, or it's going to own you.
No, you don't hesitate with power tools, anything motorized, which I steer away from those myself, actually. But point taken. I mean, I will say, I really admire your ability. It sounds like you're kind of thick-skinned to be able to look at something and say, this isn't working, and then you just kind of keep going. And maybe that comes with experience. But I think when someone asked me the same question recently, and I said, my advice to people is you have to be ready to disappoint people, because you're going to say no. Like when you're getting started and you haven't published anything yet, and you don't have an agent, and you're really just still, you know, you've got this thing that's really important to you. It means that you're giving time to that, and it's taking time away from other people that you really love, and you're going to have to say no to them. And
they're not going to like it, because they're like, well, what is all this writing got? Have you published anything? You know what I mean? Yeah,
exactly. So be ready to disappoint people. And Hilary Mantel said it better. Giving Up the Ghost. Do you read memoir?
I don't usually read memoir. I'm weird. I don't even read short stories. I just read novels. I am what I eat kind of thing.
I don't read short stories either, because I want a big, feast, but I love memoir. And Hilary Mantel wrote what's the trilogy called, the Wolf Hall trilogy. Yeah. And she has this line, and she had, talk about, if anybody can do it, you can do it. She had debilitating, now I'm going to forget what her illness was, endometriosis, that was bizarrely presenting itself and undiagnosed for decades. And in the meantime, she was kind of bedridden and writing these, Booker award-winning books. Anyway, she says, in part of this, she says, don't think you can have friends. That's part of her advice, is when you're going to do this is what, you need to focus on. So be ready to say no to people.
Yeah. And my kids have been helped to make a great excuse for that too.
Yeah.
Because they understand kids more than your writing hobby.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's look, I got 3 kids here. I can't just, especially because I have so many friends in bands, you know what I mean? It's I can't.
Yes.
And I'm 90 minutes away from Seattle, so I'm constantly disappointing my friends in bands because I can't come see their bands. But sometimes it's because I got to work, but I can always say it's because of my kids, and everybody will understand.
I can't do that. I don't have children, so that, especially as a as a non-mother, I'm missing that. I don't get to play that card.
Dang it.
That's okay.
Say you have kids. Just start sending out a Christmas card every year with somebody else's kids. They're a great excuse. That's my advice for writers. Have kids, use them as your excuse.
Yeah. I have a very, yeah. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay.
You went a little wobbly there for a minute.
I think everybody's watching TV now. And thank you, Michael, for putting the literary arts link in the chat. So we don't have any other questions. Is there anything else you'd want to talk a little bit about for this
I'm
book?
good. Hey, if they're not curious enough to ask me any questions, I think they've probably had enough, right? I mean, it's 7:54. We've done our due diligence here.
I have one last question. What are you reading right now?
I just finished reading Bill Rohrback's wonderful Lucky Turtle.
I don't know that.
What I read is what is on my blurb pile. Essentially, it's come to that. I have a hard time saying no, because I've been the beneficiary of them, and I know some people find it distasteful, but I don't, because I know what they mean to a writer, and I know how they help them in house. And so I was thrilled when Bill asked me to read and blurb his book, because I wanted to read it anyway. And now it was I got to read it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's I'm about to start a book. It's right here, by a woman named Davida G. Breer, called Sinkhole. I haven't started it yet. I don't know anything about it, but she sent me a nice bag of pizza dough flour, fine flour, because she knows I'm going to open my own pizzeria someday. And so I'm going to give this a shot. It is one of the sad realities that when you're willing to blurb a lot of books, you just don't get to choose what you read so much. Luckily, most of these books are all wonderful and created lovingly and stuff like that, but I don't, and the other thing is, I don't know if it's like this for you, but it's hard for me to read. I'm glad I did so much reading in my 20s and 30s. Let's put it that way. I read all the pre-revolutionary Russians. I went through the French. I went through, I read so much voraciously, 5-6 books a week, because now I'm almost writing all the time. And it's really hard for me to read when I write, because I just get excited to write. Yeah. I'll be reading a book, and the better the book is, the more I'm like, I want to go do this. You know what I mean? It's just like watching guys play basketball. You just want to,
get out there and do it.
When it's over, I want to go out and play basketball. Yeah.
Well, your work ethic is really inspiring. It's really helps me to hear that, because we all need a little inspiration. So I also wanted to remember to mention that Annie Blooms has copies of your book that are signed. Yes, are they?
Right, Michael, we got signed copies, right?
I
think
I'm
so.
not sure if they're either signed or are you sending?
Yeah, I sent book plates to I think every store on my docket.
Book plates, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you can't get to Eagle Harbor tomorrow, you can get to Annie Blooms.
Yeah. And you can also just order right now by clicking on the link that I'll put in the chat again.
Okay.
There we go, folks. Make it
In
easy.
closing, I just really want to thank you again, Michael, for hosting. And I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me because
Thank you.
I mean, I know you have your own writing life and you're in Mexico and you're not even, you got to do this for yourself when you support your own book. It's like, it's a big ask. You know, it's kind of like asking, at least it only takes an hour. A blurb takes longer because it's like 5 hours. I promise now I'll never ask you for a blurb. How's that? You're off the hook.
Well, I don't think you'll ever need my blurb, but it was an absolute pleasure.
Everybody says no to me. I swear to God, except I got turned down by like 12 people. That's the irony of it. If you're going to do it out of the goodness of your heart, don't expect it to come back to you, because I've had people I've blurb not blurb me back. It's not a tit for tat thing. You just something you do and hope it pays forward somehow to somebody else. But thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It was my pleasure. I loved reading this book, and I've loved your other books. I wish you all the luck in the world with it, and I can't wait for the next one.
Thank you. And next time you have a book out and you need a conversation partner, I'm here for you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'll remember that.
Yeah.
Nice. And thank you both. That was really wonderful.
Thanks. And thanks to all who attended.
Yeah, this meeting's being recorded. It'll be up on our YouTube site later on. So if you know someone who missed it and wanted to see this, it'll be up there for all eternity.
Great.
So yeah, good resource. And that link will be on the website on the event page for this event. So you can go and find it there.
All righty.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much, everybody involved. I surely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Now I can tell my kids they can make noise again.
Yeah. Right.
I'll see you.
Bye.